It's so annoying, isn't it, when we have a response to something innocently said, some very totally innocent situation that is completely overblown and ends up with us attacking ourselves and creating this really negative inner dialogue, which can be quite angry and fighty, and then also be quite sort of squashing and have us tumbling down the self-doubt spiral, all because of some little trigger. But it's not, and this episode is not about people deliberately triggering people, finding their weak spots and niggling away at them because they want to be mean and horrid. It's not that at all. It's about us having responses to things that nobody has intentionally done because of question mark, question mark. So it's an annoying state to get in, and we've got some control over it because it's all about feelings, it's all about our responses to things. And yes, we do have control over that. Even if emotions are very instant, the better we get at spotting what's going on and managing it, then yeah, we've got some control. So take back control and let's not get triggered quite so easily. Let's not start attacking ourselves and going down that self-doubt spiral. Are you ready to explore? Because I'm going to give you 4 really interesting little stories that explain this well, I think. Very real, very human. A couple of quotes thrown in that might be good thought nudges, and importantly, some actions to take to help with this overblown response to non-intentional triggers. Okay, let's go. So hi, I'm Trisha Lewis. I'm the host of Self-Belief Unsquashed, and it's just real human stuff because we've got brains in dark skulls that quite sometimes get things messed up, and we are full of all this complicated wiring as humans, and we can just find ourselves being attacked by things like imposter syndrome and comparisonitis and people pleasing and annoying things like that, which make us feel quite angry with ourselves. So these podcast episodes are really about bringing some of those out, putting them on the forensic table and examining them like little detectives that we are. Ready? Well, let's get curious. So first and foremost, triggers are quite interesting things that can be very positive. And I'll just read a little quote here that I found by Dr. Nicole LePera. There's nothing negative about being triggered. It's a calling to heal our wounds. It's a calling to self-reflect and to get, my favorite word, curious about the reaction we are having. And that's the point, isn't it? Because we're in charge of that, actually. Right, those stories I promised you, they all have a common theme. I guess it's one of my triggers, one of my sensitivities, something that I overreact to, not being taken seriously. So, how has this happened? I'm going to take you back to the netball captains choosing their teams when I was about 12 at an all-girls school, and me being the kid left all alone at the end, which one of the team captains had the misfortune to have on their team. It's not a very nice feeling, actually. It was the same story at sports day. I was the kid that was still running around the running track when everybody else had moved on to the high jump, and don't let's even start on the high jump. So I have memories that are not pleasant of not being taken seriously as a sports person. And we'll come back to that in a minute. We'll bring it back to present day and an experience I had quite recently where I realized that that was probably one of my little funny triggers, that netball situation. Number 2, I went to a boys' school when I was 16. I did my A-levels. I was one of 6 girls who went to this really posh, grand, old-fashioned, boys' school, lawns and chapels and all the rest of it. And being one of 6 in a huge boys' school meant that obviously there were times where you got teased. And I remember getting into discussions, debates, whatever, in the studies of various boys, and getting just muddled or something, and then them immediately pouncing on the fact that I was unable to hold my own when it came to this discussion, and teasing me and laughing at me. And then I made it worse by losing it, getting angry and storming out, slamming the door and probably crying. And then I self-berated because I was now not only feeling angry about not being taken seriously, but also feeling stupid for crying and making a pathetic exit. Right, okay, next. Being called crazy. Now, the point with the word crazy is it is often used in a very affectionate, complimentary fashion in my life. But if I'm feeling a bit sensitive, I take it quite the opposite. And this happened a few times when I was sort of setting up as a coach and I was going to business networking. And actually, the more relaxed I was, the more likely it was to happen because I was being me, and I can be a bit random and a bit spontaneous and a bit funny or whatever. And I remember somebody saying, we love you, Tricia, you're crazy. And on that particular day, I remember having a really, really negative response to that word. What, you're not going to take me seriously as a businesswoman, as a grown-up? I'm just some crazy idiot who's just silly and probably a bit mad or something. I don't know. I'm sane. What are you going? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Why are you? Yeah. Okay. And the next one, well, the next one isn't a trigger. The next one, I think, is part of the baggage that fuels this trigger. And I'm afraid to say it involves my father. But he has not been on planet Earth for a long, 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 long time. And he was a very, very successful businessman. And I grew up in the 50s and 60s, the 70s, all of this time when perhaps we could say women weren't necessarily at the table. And it was a very traditional situation in my house. My mother, who extremely intelligent, very creative, but very much, the director's wife hosting dinner parties and frustrated, I think. So I grew up in that kind of environment. My brother was groomed to be the businessman, and I think the idea for me was that I'd probably marry someone rich and that would all be fine. Anyway, I remember a situation which I can laugh at now, but it was actually when my father was in his last hours of life. He'd had a couple of serious heart attacks and he'd had a very good life, I might add, but he was in hospital and actually extremely lucid because he was all, tied up to all these things that were keeping him looking as if he was, quite normal. And so we were sort of talking. And I remember him asking me what I was currently doing. And I think he was talking about my acting stuff because I did a lot of performance work. And at that time, it was mainly amateur, but I progressed into professional theatre and acting. But he said, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm in the chorus of the My Fair Lady musical in the sort of little town that we lived in." And he said, quote unquote, "Is that all?" Now, did he say that? He's on his deathbed. He might not have said it quite like that. He might certainly not have meant it to sound like that. But boy, oh boy, do I remember it. Because for me, that was the absolute nub of everything to do with our relationship. You don't take me seriously. I'm just a fluffy woman thing. And now you're saying that even when I do something quite good, it's not good enough. I'm not achieving enough because I'm not the star of the musical. I'm not some famous celebrity actor. I don't know what it is you want of me, but I'm not it, am I? Sorry, bit of therapy there. It's quite therapeutic, actually. May he rest in peace. There was lots of nice things about my father, but this could be the bit of baggage that basically is lingering and therefore is the sort of little tinder stuff that sparks when various situations occur and I get this odd response. That response varies according to how resilient I feel on any particular day. And this is so human, isn't it? You know, those days where you just wake up feeling dull and like you've got a bit of a weight on your head, on your shoulders. There might not even be a logical reason for it. It might be the weather. It might be that you didn't sleep so well. It might be that there's a load of yucky global news. But whatever it is, you are way less resilient. And so those little things, you're going to be much more open to being triggered by. And that, I think, is a really important thing to remember. So try and say to yourself, hang on, hang on, hang on, it's one of those days. I've done another podcast about that because I think it's really important, biorhythms and all that. So I was at my climbing wall the other day, and this goes back to the netball situation and not being taken seriously. And there were all these women of a similar age, maybe not quite as old, but they were doing all these fancy climbs, you know, just really good technical moves and brave things. And one of them came down and was talking to my husband, who's way more experienced, about some technical stuff. Oh, yes, I found that move quite difficult. And yeah, no. And I was stood there feeling like a real useless person. I thought, oh, yeah, I'm just a silly beginner. I'll never be as good as you. In fact, I don't even know why I'm bothering being here. But then it sort of went more into an angry thing, more of a sort of, oh, who do you think you are? You know, oh, little Miss Cocky Pants, aren't you? You're so good. You're so good. Showing off to my husband who, oh, I don't know. All of this was just inside my head. I wasn't saying any of it. I outwardly, did I display it? I hope not. I might have been a bit withdrawn. I don't know, a little bit touchy later, whatever. But I definitely got triggered. And it was then that I went back to thinking, netball, sports day. Nobody was doing this to me. I was doing it to myself, and it was throwing me down this self-doubt spiral. And I guess being in any situation where I suddenly get this feeling that I'm being laughed at, whereas in fact, what's probably happening is that I'm being funny, and people actually have said to me how they enjoy being cheered up by my company often because I have a natural sense of humor. It's not forced, and I will often jolt people out of their slightly morose moods, and that is a really nice gift to have, and I shouldn't complain. So if somebody says something like, oh, you're just crazy, Trisha, I should take it as a compliment because it's meant as a compliment. Do you see how this works? Are you getting the gist? I would just like to interject here with the simple thing that there are some really nice triggers in our life, aren't there? They often evolve around smells and places and just situations that remind you of really lovely times. You know, walking through a field full of bluebells or something takes you back to some fabulous childhood memory of playing with your best friend, you know, out till all hours as it gets chilly in that summer evening. And, you know, you've got a bunch of bluebells to take back. And I don't know, whatever it is, there are lots of really nice things that can happen from a nice trigger. So it works all ways. I just thought I'd put that note of joy in there. But what's important is what can we do when this is happening to us, when the bad ones are happening and we are attacking ourselves and falling down this self-doubt spiral purely of our own making. Well, I've actually done something quite clever here, and I've got 3 things beginning with C. So here we go, your actions to explore, experiment with. 1, collect your triggers. So this is basically like making a bit of a trigger audit, a trigger logbook, if you like. So notice notice when, I mean, this is the big one, isn't it? Is awareness. You've got to be aware of when this is happening, and you will get better. I know from experience you will get so much better at spotting it the more you put this into practice. Number two, communicate your triggers. This is particularly relevant in relationships, in close relationships, because it's no point in you being triggered. Somebody has absolutely not done this on purpose, and now you're almost punishing them by being moody or touchy or snipey or whatever it is. And they don't even know what's going on. Okay. That's the moment where you need to say, do you know what? It's that thing you said, or it's that expression you made, or it's just a combination of things that have triggered me. And it's not you, it's something from my past, some baggage I'm holding on to. I think I need to explore this a bit. Will you explore it with me? Because no doubt that person's got their stuff as well. So communicate. So collect your triggers, communicate your triggers, and calm your triggers. Now, I'm not, as if you know me at all, I'm not particularly good at things like meditation. I don't know a huge amount about all that. I do know about breathing properly, because as an actor, you learn how to do that. I don't often do it when I'm trying to, when the situation arises is the time that we are worse at doing the things that are good for us. But again, practice, practice, practice. Try and remember, okay, this is a good moment before I go off on one internally and start beating myself up. I'm going to try and calm those responses. And it could be by some nice mantras and affirmations and breathing. Or in my case, it's usually through some kind of action. But we're all different. So I talk about knowing your squashers and your unsquashers. It's a bit like snakes and ladders. You've got moments where you've got lots of snakes, and then you've got lots of ladders, and the quicker you can get the ladder in place, the quicker you can make sure you don't fall down the snaky self-doubt spiral. So know the things that create your ladders. So for me, it often is, it could be a piece of music, it could be dancing, it could be singing, it could be walking in the fresh air, it could be just something that calms you. And something calming doesn't necessarily have to be quiet, but it could be, well, I'll give you an example. One day I was feeling weird at the climbing wall. I'd not been able to do a climb, and I was really beating myself up for no good reason. And I felt an emotional, again, I've done a podcast about this. I was flooded with an emotion. I felt tears coming to my eyes. I thought, this is ridiculous, especially as there were other people around. So I went outside and I ended up doing a little video of the climbing wall, because I'm quite good at that. Had a few viral reels on climbing walls. And so it was an action. It was an action that I'm good at. It was something that I could just focus in on. It was a little challenge. It felt like it had got an outcome to it. And yeah, it calmed me down. So it's just an example. In fact, I'm just going to read a little thing from this quite fascinating book called A Life of One's Own by Marion Milner. One of the things I mentioned earlier was about my very successful father. And I think one of my little defensive pokers, when I get all defensive and do this self-berating stuff, is the idea that I've got to achieve lots, because he was an achiever. And that seemed to be the pinnacle of what you need to do to be a worthwhile person. Now, he didn't ever say that to me, but maybe I just created that vibe somehow with a combination of things that were real and things that I was over exaggerating in my own head. But I quite like this. Listen to this. This whole thing is about her sort of journaling, her trying to work out what to do with her life and what's going wrong and why isn't she happy and could she find happiness? And it's almost like a sort of Virginia Woolf stream of consciousness that she's trying to do, just to write things down and figure out what's going on. And she says here, I found that I was continually whipping my will to effort after endless goals which might be actually shutting me away from what I really wanted, to be free from the drive after achievement. So she's sort of saying, I had this sense that I needed to achieve stuff. I had to have goals. I had to have purpose. And the more I did that, the more I was taking myself away from maybe the thing that I really would find joy in, which is being present and free from that drive. Ooh, there's a thought. The whole book is a bit like that. It's trust me, it's a really good read if you like that sort of thing. Anyway, enough. I've given you some actions to try. I've hopefully sparked a few thoughts. Remember that our brains do weird things because they are just these bits of wiring stuff in a spongy thing stuck inside a dark space. And they've got all the old wiring, the stuff that animals do, the fight and the flies and the freeze. Only we've got this neocortex thing, which I think makes life more difficult sometimes because we think we're rationalizing stuff, whereas in fact our brain is always just making best guesses and can throw us off a little bit. And it's so easy to get stuck inside that mess and go drowning in that swamp of overthinking, overreacting, making stuff up, and deliberately pushing yourself over the edge of that self-doubt spiral. So have fun keeping yourself away from that edge, and let me know what you think about those little experiments to try. Stay curious and unsquashed. And remember, TrishaLewis.com is where you'll find links to more unsquashing resources and links to my book and my TEDx, all on this unsquashing theme. So enjoy that. Till the next time. The questions never change.